Hey, how's it going? This is Chris with Wav.Formation Music. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and today I want to talk to you about why your trap drums are sounding stale and just lifeless. Before we get into it, make sure you've liked, subscribed, and hit the bell notification for future tutorials and videos. So there's 5 tips I want to give you today that's really going to help improve your drums and give it more life, but overall, the main reason why your drums are feeling stale is because of timing. It's either your timing is too good or not good enough. So let's dive into it. Okay, so the main culprit for why modern music drums today are feeling stale and robotic is the fact that everything is getting drawn in via computer, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're just leaving it as is, if you just draw in the notes and you leave it as is, it's going to feel really stale and really robotic, just because of the fact that it's perfectly on the grid. See this grid? See this line right here? If I draw in a snare drum right here and I hit play, if you listen to it with the metronome, it's hitting right on the metronome, being perfectly in time. And no human being in the world, not even the best drummer, can play perfectly on time. And the fact of having a groove to your drums is what makes it sound good. So I'm gonna show you a few tricks on how we can get your drums to start grooving a little bit, even if your method is to draw in the drums just like this. And I do this sometimes too. I draw in my drums, and these are some tricks that I do. Okay, so first one is going to be delaying some of your tracks. So in this instance, in Ableton Live, to do that, you go over to this D over here in the right corner, You hit that D, and these track delays pop up underneath each track. So you can move it by milliseconds, and going positive means that it goes late, and going negative means it comes early. So if you listen to the metronome, that's very drastic, but you can tell that it is hitting after the metronome. It's hitting 30 milliseconds to be exact after the metronome. So it's hitting it off the grid. So you can always do this, but I like to do this trick in Ableton because it will shift the entire track, and you can still have everything aligned and not look all funky. So if you delay it by, say, let's move it by 9 milliseconds. We've already got a groove going now, right? There's a slight delay, and it's giving it that swing. So we're gonna leave that with the snare, and then if we do the hi-hats, that's a little fast. Let's do 1/8. Draw in the hi-hats, and you can tell now that our hi-hats are perfectly in line, right? Because I just drew it straight on there, and it's perfectly aligned, so it's feeling very robotronic. So we're gonna do the same thing with those. We're gonna delay that a little bit. And just the fact of it being late, you can already tell that there is more movement and there's more life to it, and we haven't even done anything else besides just a track delay. So we can do that with everything. Well, maybe not everything. The kick drums I actually like to keep on the grid just so we have something that is on time. The only times I would really move the kick off the grid or delayed would be an accent kick drum. So not something on the downbeat, but just an accent. So in this case, what I mean is this is an accent drum. This is on the downbeat. This is an accent. So I'm going to move this slightly to the right. And it's already got more of a swing, just the fact of us putting a little bit of delay in these tracks. All right, so moving on to tip number 2, panning. Panning is when you move something either left dominant or right dominant of the stereo spectrum that you're sitting at. So say that I pulled these hi-hats completely left, completely right. So you can tell that it's shifting now, right? Everything is moving to the left or to the right. And what we want is a little bit of randomness in this. Having this randomness, again, gives it that lively feel and a little bit of that human, like, kind of just movement. So in Ableton, if you go into simpler, there's a cool little random pan right here that you can just crank up and it randomly pans it for you. So right away you can tell we're already getting more bounce, more movement, because it's moving between left and right, and you don't know where it's going at because it's a random pan. But another trick that you can do is using the auto pan plugin that is native within Ableton. Doing it this way, you have a little bit more control. You can control the rate of how quickly it goes and the amount of how left and how right it goes. You can control the shape, and to have control of the randomness, there's a little knob right here. This is so we're moving in a sine wave right now. There's a random function, and you can choose the amount. And how quickly it moves left and right. So that's panning on the hi-hats. Okay, so tip number 3 is something that has to do specifically with open hi-hats. Earlier I said that we like to move everything slightly to the right, being delayed. This depends on the groove, but sometimes I like to move your open hi-hat to the left, making it a little bit earlier, so it gives it that kind of like jolting feeling. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to pull in an open hi-hat. That's an open one. Okay, so we're going to pull it into the drum rack here. And I'm going to move this note. See, that's pretty cool too, because it's still sitting shifted to the right. And so it's late and it sounds cool, it sounds lazy, but sometimes I like to move it to the right, to the left, just so it's slightly early, so we're going like. Again, a different feeling, but this is something you're going to want to sit down and play with, depending on your track, depending on what you like and your taste. This is all going to vary, but this is something I like to do. Since everything is shifted to be delayed, I like to have a few elements shifted to be early, just to give it more movement. That's what we're going for right now, people. We're going for movement. And so that's the third tip about your open hi-hats. So a fourth tip I have for you to making your drums groove is repitching certain things. And the hi-hat is something that comes in very frequently. It comes in as very repetitive, so we like to change up hi-hats as much as we can. And here's a trick to do so in Ableton. Again, you can do this in other DAWs, but I just don't know exactly how. I know in FL Studio, to do this track delay thing, there's a shift knob that you can shift everything slightly to the left or to the right, but otherwise I'm not too sure about this next tip. I know that within Ableton, you have, in your simpler, you have an LFO. You have an LFO you can play with. So again, this is kind of like the auto panning thing. There's like a time that you can choose between hertz, or you can choose between specific timing. But what I like to do with this is, again, put this on random, so we have a bunch of random movement up in here. But we're gonna turn the pitch up a little bit so that we get random pitching. And again, like a live drummer, when they're playing the hi-hat, they're not hitting the exact same spot at the exact same velocity at the exact same thing every time. So if we crank this up, it's going to start changing the pitch a little bit, giving it some randomness. See, we're starting to get all over the place now because I have pitched up like 80-90%. But if you play with that and just do slight alterations, it can really make a huge difference in your drums. Okay, and so my fifth tip here is leaving space between hits. And this pattern I have right here, this is super repetitive, and I just drew this in real quick, but you hear a lot of drums that do this, right? And though it's cool and it's moving and all that good stuff, but Sometimes I like to leave a little bit of space between your drums because it really makes it groove that much more. Like say I just took out this one hi-hat pattern right here. This first hi-hat note on the downbeat. If I took that out, we're already bouncing a lot more. And that's just because I took one note away. So just remember to don't always have to completely drown everything out with sound. The fact that you have space between your sounds is gonna bring your track to life that much more. See how much of a difference space makes? Let's go back and leave them and put them back in. Take them out. And between having your drums and all your other instruments and elements in your songs, it's gonna feel really good when you free up some space. So don't completely drown out every single millisecond with sound. Leave some space. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for this tutorial. I just wanted to throw down something quick and dirty so you can get your drums to start moving a little bit and get out of that robotic state. And so if you liked what you saw and you learned a little bit of something, then please hit that like button, hit subscribe, and that bell notification if you want to be alerted for more tutorials and future videos.